Lynda Randle, a beloved TV personality and outspoken voice, found herself in the middle of a shocking and unforgettable moment. Today, the courtroom, usually filled with the hum of legal jargon and calm deliberation, suddenly grew tense as the judge prepared to deliver the sentence. As Randle stood there, her face a mix of anticipation and dread, no one could have predicted what was about to unfold. The words that followed seemed to freeze the air, heavy with the gravity of what was being said. In an instant, her expression changed from shock to something far more alarming. Before anyone could fully process the situation, Lynda Randle collapsed right there in the center of the courtroom as her legs gave way beneath her. What could have caused such a visceral reaction? Was it the weight of the sentence itself, or something more personal? The room fell into a stunned silence as people rushed to her side, the situation unfolding faster than anyone would have expected. This unexpected turn of events has everyone questioning the true story behind Randle's collapse and the harsh reality she now faces. Lynda Randle has always been seen as a beacon of positivity and faith, known for her powerful voice and inspiring messages in gospel music. However, recently, whispers and rumors have been circulating about her facing serious legal trouble and even a potential imprisonment. For years, she had built an image of unwavering grace, a woman deeply rooted in her faith and ministry. But now, these rumors are painting a different picture. The rumors first began when Lynda was allegedly linked to a financial scandal involving her charity work. Insiders claimed that during a routine audit, discrepancies were found in the records of the charity she runs, suggesting that funds intended for helping the underprivileged were being misused. While the details of the charges remain unclear, the whispers grew louder, with some claiming that Lynda was implicated in money laundering or fraud. Fans and those close to her found it hard to reconcile these allegations with the woman they had admired for so long. As the rumors spread, people began speculating about the severity of the legal trouble she might be facing. Some reports suggested that Lynda had been charged with embezzling money from the donations meant for her ministry. Others hinted at a possible cover-up, with rumors claiming that there was a group of insiders trying to protect her from facing the full extent of the law. The accusations left fans in shock. For years, Lynda had been a trusted figure, a voice of hope and inspiration. The thought that she could be involved in such serious legal issues was almost too much to bear for many of her supporters. As the rumors escalated, many questioned whether they had truly known the woman behind the public persona, wondering if all the good deeds she had done over the years were somehow tainted by these recent allegations. What made things even more difficult for Lynda was the lack of clear communication from her camp. She remained silent, and her legal team made no public statement addressing the rumors, leaving her fans in the dark. The silence only fueled speculation. As one rumor after another spread, it became harder to distinguish truth from fiction. Was she guilty? Was she just a victim of a smear campaign? Fans, critics, and the media were left wondering what was really going on behind the scenes. Despite the silence, pressure on Lynda to address the allegations grew. Her followers waited for her to speak out, hoping she would clear her name. But with every passing day, the questions became more intense. Could the truth really be so complicated that she couldn't even address it publicly? Or was there something more sinister at play? Only time would tell if these rumors were ever truly put to rest, or if they would ultimately tarnish the legacy that Lynda Randle had spent so many years building. The courtroom was eerily silent as the tension in the room mounted. Lynda Randle, known to millions for her inspirational gospel music and unwavering faith, stood before the judge. Her heart pounded in her chest as she listened to the legal proceedings, the weight of the situation beginning to settle on her. Her once unshakable confidence was gone, replaced with a cold sense of dread. She had never imagined that her life would come to this, that one day she would stand in front of a judge in a situation so dire. It had all started with rumors, whispers of financial mismanagement, of funds that had gone missing, of donations meant for the needy being redirected elsewhere. But she had never imagined that these rumors would spiral into something so much worse. What had seemed like mere gossip was now reality. There was no denying it anymore. She was caught up in something bigger than she could have ever imagined. The prosecutor had painted a damning picture. The evidence they presented against her seemed overwhelming. Documents that looked like they had been tampered with, discrepancies in charity financial reports, and even a few witnesses who claimed to have seen her involved in the mismanagement of funds. Lynda had tried to maintain her composure, but inside, she was unraveling. The woman who had built a career on uplifting others was now fighting for her freedom. How had it come to this? The judge's words cut through the heavy silence. Ms. Randle, the evidence before this court is clear, and the charges are severe. You have been accused of embezzling charity funds, misappropriating resources, and deceiving the public for personal gain." Lynda's breath caught in her throat. She had never imagined that these accusations would ever come this close to reality. The thought of being labeled as a criminal, the thought of possibly losing her freedom, was almost too much to bear. Her legs felt weak beneath her, her knees shaking. She gripped the edge of the podium to steady herself. "Are you guilty of these charges?" the judge asked, his voice calm but stern. Lynda opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her mind raced, desperately trying to find the right words, trying to hold on to something solid. But all she could think about was how everything she had worked for, everything she had built, was now on the verge of being destroyed. How had she ended up here? As the silence stretched on, Lynda felt the weight of the room's gaze on her. Her family, who had been sitting behind her in the courtroom, looked on with concern. Her husband's face was pale, his eyes filled with worry. She had always tried to be the strong one, the one who could handle anything that came her way, but now she was the one in need of support, the one who felt utterly helpless. And then it happened. Just as the judge was about to speak again, the room seemed to spin around her. She had never felt so dizzy, so overwhelmed. Her body trembled, and before she could catch herself, her knees buckled. She collapsed to the floor in front of the entire courtroom. Gasps filled the air as people rushed to her side. She could hear their voices, muffled as if they were coming from far away. Her vision blurred, and for a moment, everything felt unreal. Was this really happening to her? Her family rushed forward, her husband by her side, trying to help her back to her feet. But the embarrassment, the fear, and the overwhelming sense of dread weighed too heavily on her. She couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the physical collapse, it was the emotional weight that had crushed her. The realization that everything she had worked for, everything she had believed in, might be falling apart. The doctor was called in, and after a few moments of examination, Lynda was helped to a nearby bench, where she sat with her head in her hands. The trial had come to a standstill. The judge had called for a break, and the room buzzed with hushed conversations. Lynda's family gathered around her, offering what little comfort they could in the midst of the chaos. But nothing could make this moment better. She was lost in a sea of confusion and doubt. Her fans, who had supported her throughout her career, were now left in shock. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. The woman who had been a source of inspiration, the one who had shared her faith with the world, was now at the center of a legal scandal that threatened to destroy everything. The media had picked up on the story, and soon, the courtroom drama was being broadcasted to the world. The questions began. Was she guilty? Was this all a setup? Was there more to the story than what the public had been told? For Lynda, the hardest part was facing the reality that her reputation, everything she had built, was now in jeopardy. She had always prided herself on being a woman of integrity, of standing firm in her beliefs. But now, the world was questioning everything she had done. The whispers that had once been nothing more than gossip were now turning into accusations, and she couldn't escape them. As Lynda sat there, struggling to make sense of the situation, she couldn't help but think of the years she had spent helping others, of the lives she had touched with her music and her message. She had always believed that her work was for something greater than herself, but now, that very work was being used against her. Her heart ached as she thought about the legacy she had built, and the possibility that it might all come crashing down. The courtroom was once again silent as the judge prepared to resume the proceedings. Lynda took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She wasn't sure what would happen next, or how she would navigate the storm that had descended upon her life. But she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't give up now. Despite the crushing weight of the moment, she would have to find a way to stand tall again. Lynda Randle stood at the front of the courtroom, her knees trembling, her heart racing with every beat. She had always prided herself on being a person of faith, someone who could handle any challenge with grace and strength. But today, the weight of the moment was almost unbearable. As the judge prepared to deliver the verdict, Lynda's mind raced, and her thoughts were clouded with anxiety. She had spent so many years building her career, sharing her music, and spreading messages of hope and love. And now, everything she had worked for seemed to hang in the balance. The courtroom, usually a place of calm deliberation, felt different today. It felt like the air itself was thick with tension, every breath an effort. Lynda could feel the eyes of the gallery on her, the gaze of her family and her fans, all hoping for a different outcome. She knew they were all waiting for the same thing, to hear whether she would be exonerated or condemned. What had started as rumors and whispers was now coming to a head. What had begun as an accusation of financial mismanagement was now threatening to unravel her entire life. She could hear the whispers in her mind, the accusations that had followed her for months, the questions about whether she had done something wrong. It was all leading to this one moment. As the judge's voice rang out, Lynda's heart skipped a beat. After careful consideration of the evidence and testimony presented in this case, the court finds the defendant guilty of embezzling charitable funds and misappropriating donations for personal use. The words hung in the air, sharp and cold, each syllable cutting through her like a blade. She had been convicted. Her worst nightmare had come true. She had always believed in the power of justice, in the idea that the truth would come out in the end. But now, the truth felt so distant, so distorted. The world she had built, the trust she had gained from her fans, had all been shattered in an instant. Lynda's hands trembled as she gripped the podium in front of her. The room seemed to spin around her, the voices growing muffled as a sudden wave of dizziness overtook her. Her eyes blurred with tears, and she fought to hold back the emotions threatening to spill over. She had spent so much of her life helping others, so much of her energy invested in spreading love and faith through her music. How could this be happening to her? How had it all gone so wrong? The judge continued speaking, but Lynda couldn't hear the words anymore. She was numb, her mind struggling to make sense of the situation. It felt like an out-of-body experience, like she was watching everything unfold from a distance, unable to grasp the reality of what was happening. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the blood rushing in her ears, the overwhelming weight of the verdict pressing down on her. She had never felt so small, so insignificant, so utterly lost. Her family, sitting behind her in the courtroom, looked on with concern. Her husband, his face pale and drawn, sat with his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Their children, who had always looked up to her as a source of strength, now looked at her with wide, uncertain eyes. How would they react to this? How would they cope with the reality of their mother's fall from grace? Lynda felt a pang of guilt at the thought of how this would affect them. They had always been so proud of her, so proud of her career, of the way she had built her life on faith and integrity, and now she had failed them. She had failed herself. As the court proceedings continued, Lynda tried to focus, tried to stay present, but her mind was overwhelmed with the crushing weight of the verdict. She couldn't help but replay the events that had led to this moment in her head. The rumors, the accusations, the lies that had spread like wildfire. She had spent so many sleepless nights wondering how it had all gone so wrong, how the very thing she had built with so much care and devotion could now be crumbling around her, but she never could have imagined it would end like this. Lynda knew that the damage to her reputation was already done. No matter what happened next, the public would forever associate her with the scandal. The trust that her fans had placed in her, the trust that she had worked so hard to build, was now shattered. And no matter how much she tried to explain herself, no matter how much she tried to tell the truth, she knew that it might not be enough. The damage had already been done. As the judge called for the next part of the proceedings, Lynda's mind drifted back to the moments that had led her here. She thought about her music, her career, the countless lives she had touched with her songs. She thought about her faith, which had always been her anchor in times of trouble. And she thought about the people who had believed in her, who had supported her through everything. She had always prided herself on being a woman of integrity, someone who did the right thing no matter the cost. But now, the world saw her differently. Now, the world saw her as someone who had betrayed the very trust that had made her a beloved figure in the gospel music world. The emotions that had been building inside her finally overflowed. She could no longer hold back the tears. She felt a wave of sadness wash over her, a sadness so deep it felt like it would consume her whole. The courtroom was quiet, the only sound the rustling of papers and the soft shuffle of feet. And then, Lynda collapsed. She had never felt so defeated, so utterly broken. Her legs gave way beneath her, and she crumpled to the floor, unable to hold herself up anymore. Her family rushed to her side, their faces filled with concern and fear. Her husband gently lifted her into his arms, his voice soft as he whispered words of comfort. But Lynda couldn't hear him. She couldn't hear anything. All she could hear was the sound of her own heart breaking. She had lost everything: the trust of her fans, her reputation, her sense of self. And now, she was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered life. As the courtroom buzzed with activity, Lynda's mind drifted back to the beginning. She thought about the woman she used to be. The woman who had stood tall, who had faced challenges with strength and grace. She had always believed in the power of redemption, in the idea that no matter how far you fall, you can always rise again. But now, she wasn't sure if she could. Now, she wasn't sure if she could ever find her way back from this. The weight of the verdict, the public fallout, the damage to her career. It was all too much. But one thing was certain. Lynda Randle was not ready to give up. She didn't know how, but she was determined to find a way through this, to rebuild her life and her legacy. It wouldn't be easy. It might take years. But she knew one thing. She wasn't ready to let this define her. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was a road she had to travel, and no matter how hard it was, she was going to keep walking. The courtroom buzzed with the murmur of conversations and the shuffle of feet. But for Lynda Randle, the world seemed to stand still. She had just been handed a verdict that no one expected, not even her. She had always prided herself on being a person of faith, someone whose words and actions matched the messages of hope and strength she sang about. But now, that world she had built, the career, the respect, the love of her fans, was crumbling around her. As she was helped out of the courtroom, a sense of disbelief and shame settled over her. She had just been convicted, and nothing in the world could prepare her for the reaction that was about to follow. The first reactions came from her fans, the people who had supported her for years. Many of them couldn't believe it. How could this woman, the voice of hope and healing, the one who had made them believe in the power of faith and perseverance, be capable of such a betrayal? Fans flooded social media, expressing their shock and disbelief. They had followed her journey for so long, listening to her music, attending her concerts, and believing in her message. They had trusted her, seen her as a beacon of light in a sometimes dark world, and now it seemed that trust had been shattered. Some fans were vocal in their defense, insisting that Lynda was a victim of the system, that the accusations against her were exaggerated or fabricated. They argued that the legal system had misunderstood her intentions, that her involvement in the scandal was more about miscommunication or poor decisions than malicious intent. "Lynda's music helped me through the hardest times of my life," one fan posted. "She's a strong woman, and I refuse to believe she would intentionally hurt anyone." But there were others who felt deeply betrayed. They had believed in her for so long, trusted her words, and now they felt as if they had been deceived. They questioned how someone who had spent years preaching love and integrity could end up in such a situation. The news of her conviction spread like wildfire, with countless people pouring into the comment sections, asking what had happened, why Lynda had allowed herself to get caught up in something so damaging to her image. Some were even calling for her to be removed from the stage, saying that she no longer deserved the platform she had once held. The reaction from her family was equally mixed. Her husband, who had stood by her through thick and thin, was devastated. He had been her rock, her partner, the one person she had always turned to when the world became too overwhelming. He had always believed in her, and now, it felt as if everything they had built together was being torn apart. He remained quiet, his face a mask of sadness and resignation, as he stood by her side. No words could express the pain he felt. He was a man of few words, and this moment of silence spoke volumes. Her children, who had looked up to her as a figure of strength, were also grappling with the reality of what had happened. They had grown up in a household that valued honesty, integrity, and faith. But now, their mother, the person they had admired and respected, was facing consequences that no one could have anticipated. Their own emotions were a whirlwind: guilt, confusion, and fear. They didn't know how to react, how to support her in this moment of crisis. They had always seen their mother as a role model, someone who had never wavered in her convictions, and now they were forced to confront the reality that even the strongest people could fall. As the news spread beyond her immediate circle, Lynda's colleagues and friends in the music industry also weighed in. Many of them were deeply saddened by the turn of events, offering their support but also expressing a sense of disbelief. "I've worked with Lynda for years, and I know her heart," one longtime collaborator shared in an interview. "She's always been someone who cares deeply about others, and I can't imagine what she's going through right now." But this is bigger than just a mistake. It's a wake-up call for all of us in this industry. We need to be more accountable. But not everyone was willing to extend the same understanding. Some saw this as the end of Lynda's career, a stain on her legacy that could never be washed away. They believed that her actions, whatever the reason, were inexcusable, and that she had lost the trust of her fans and peers alike. The media, of course, was quick to capitalize on the drama, running headlines that made the situation seem even worse than it was. The more sensational the story, the better it sold. Gospel singers fall from grace, read one headline. Lynda Randle, from worship leader to convict, shouted another.